Hello, everyone. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at one of the central intertexts that Rudyard Kipling uses in his short story, The Mark of the Beast. And in fact, the source from which Kipling derives his title. Many of the themes that Kipling explores in this text are predicated on an understanding of and an ability to reference this biblical source. So, The Mark of the Beast, the title, and the thing that Fleet attempts to brand onto the idol of Hanuman is referenced in the book of Revelation. Half of this video is going to deal with a description of the book of Revelation and the provision of some context for this biblical allusion. And the rest of this video is going to talk about how Kipling takes this image from the Bible, or this idea or concept from the Bible, and applies it in his story as part of a commentary on colonialism, potentially. First of all, the idea of the mark of the beast, or the mark of the beast itself, is an allusion to the book of Revelation. The Christian Bible is divided up into a series of, in the Protestant canon, 66 different books. So the book of Genesis is the first book of the Bible. It's a cohesive, not necessarily singular story, but it's one section of the Bible. Inside the Bible, you have these various different books divided up into, again, in the Christian kind of canon, the Old Testament and the New Testament, Genesis being the first book of the Old Testament, leading up into the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels, and it ends with that last book, the book of Revelation. Now, the Bible is rife with myriad literary genres. Some of the texts, some of these books are mythohistory, some of them are history. Things like the Psalms are poetry. Books like Ecclesiastes or Proverbs are wisdom literature. So they're kind of philosophy or proverbial sayings. Then you have the Gospels, which are essentially in the genre of ancient biography. So looking at historical examples and the conventions of various different literary genres and the way in which they're written, they can be categorized according to types. Revelation is a specific kind of apocalyptic literature. Now, apocalyptic literature is literature that is meant to convey something through symbolic means. It generally deals with fantastical, otherworldly, and bizarre visions. It communicates things through a language of pure symbolism. To better understand the book of Revelation, before I speak about it a little bit more, I'd like you to pause this video, go into the description for this video, and watch a short clip from the introduction to the film Dawn of the Dead. As you watch this video, I would encourage you to have the lyrics to the song When the Man Comes Around by Johnny Cash open in another tab. You can find those lyrics in Omnivox in the Distributed Documents tab. Because over this introduction, Johnny Cash will be performing his song When the Man Comes Around. And almost every part of those lyrics is either a direct quotation from or an allusion to something from the book of Revelation. So as you think about the images that you're seeing and the lyrics that you're listening to, you try to think about what this book of Revelation is like, what it's all about. Now, from that video clip, you can get a kind of sense of the language that's being used, the imagery that's being used, and the central subject of the book of Revelation. Now, there are innumerable different interpretations of the book of Revelation and the meaning of its symbolism and its allegory, and in the Christian view, its prophecies regarding either the near future or the far future. And there's a great deal of debate because the entire text is couched in symbolic language. It is, however, allegorical in nature, and it deals with tremendously disturbing imagery that most people, in a kind of contemporary evangelical sense, believe is prophetic and pertains to the end of the world. The entire narrative is based on figurative language. So you'll have fantastical beasts that are seen, or 7 candlesticks and 7 lamps, angels and multitudes of beings in heaven, angels with eyes in their wings within and without, representing a kind of divine vision, encounters with God seated on the throne in heaven, an image of glassy seas, the world being overturning, a virgin giving birth, and that baby being poised to be consumed by a dragon, a heavenly war between Michael, his archangels, and the dragon. So it's all couched in this bizarre figurative language that makes it incredibly difficult to interpret and understand. But it's this book, and something specific from this book, The Mark of the Beast, to which Kipling is alluding in his title. And understanding this book, understanding its context, and looking at the specific reference that Kipling is making will help us to better understand the argument or the ideas that he's trying to convey. Some of the kinds of imagery that we see in the book of Revelation. We have here the 4 riders of the apocalypse. So death, famine, plague, pestilence, they're loosed upon the earth, and they are figured, these sort of disasters or calamities in the world that are not tangible necessarily. They're figured in the forms of horsemen that are riding out to battle, riding out to destroy and consume. You have another four horsemen of the apocalypse. For those of you who may remember the X-Men movie, X-Men Apocalypse, from about 6 years ago now, I think, um, these are the figures to which that tale was alluding. Death on his pale horse. Now, like these allegorical figures, these allegorical or symbolic representations of death, famine, plague, and the like, we also have representations of various different kinds of beasts. And we're going to talk about what they might symbolize and how Kipling is using them. The specific passage to which Kipling is alluding in The Mark of the Beast derives from the 13th and 14th chapters of Revelation, this last book of the Christian Bible. I'm going to read through this section of the text with you, commenting a little bit along the way, and then we'll look at traditional Christian interpretations of these passages in order to better understand what Kipling is trying to say here. Revelation 13, as John, the apostle and the author of this book, supposedly, records what he says is a kind of dream vision, a dream vision of heaven, wherein God is offering to him prophetic knowledge of the future by way of this symbolic imagery in his dreams, or in his, not even in his dream, but in this vision that he has of heaven. Okay. He writes in the 13th chapter, in this vision that he's having, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power, and his seat and great authority." So I'll pause here and comment for just a moment. Already you might be hearing some resonance from the Mark of the Beast short story, because Fleet develops these kinds of, well, not leprous spots, but leopardous spots in a sense. And he starts to take on this characteristic of a leopard. The dragon is referred to in Revelation as that serpent of old, the devil. So the dragon is a representation of Satan, the serpent from the garden that tempted Adam and Eve into eating the fruit and the like. So we have the devil giving power to this beast, or the dragon giving power to this beast, and it's couched in this language that's familiar to us a little bit from the Mark of the Beast. John continues describing this vision of the future, or this prophetic vision that he's been given by God. "And I saw that one of the heads, as it was wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name in his tabernacle, and then to dwell in heaven." In a depiction of this event, we have The Great Red Dragon and the Beast from the Sea by William Blake. This artistic depiction of this multi-headed beast rising from the sea, lorded over by the dragon, or Satan, that is giving him authority and power. He is crowned with authority, and he is rising out of the ocean to rule over the world. Let's continue on. In Revelation 13, 7-12. "And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given to him over all kindreds and tongues and nations." So this beast is an allegorical or symbolic representation of something that controls everything. He is making war against the saints, the believers, the Christians. He is overcoming them. He is destroying them. And power is given to him over all kindreds, all tongues, and all nations. So his dominion is over everything that exists. "And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life, and the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." So here, the book of life is the book wherein the names of the faithful Christians are written. They're the ones who are faithful, who put their trust in the Lamb who was slain from the foundation of the world. This is Jesus. It's referred to as such a number of times in scriptures. "If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints." So what John is saying here is that He that killeth the sword must be killed with the sword. The people who have been persecuting the Christians will face their just judgment one day. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. The saints who are suffering and being beset by the beast will eventually have justice executed on their behalf. And that is their patience in suffering and death, and their faith that carries them through that death because they believe that something will eventually mete out justice to their tormentor. And I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as the dragon. So remember, the dragon is Satan. So this new beast that is emerging from the waters is speaking with the voice of Satan. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth of them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by means of these miracles, which he had the power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live. So what's going on here is complex. It's difficult. There are multiple competing interpretations. But we have a beast that rules over the entire world, that has dominion over the entire world. It's encouraging people under its rule to engage in blasphemies. And anyone who submits to the authority of this beast will live, and those who are faithful, the kinds of Christians in the allegory, will be killed, but they'll be justified by the end, because there's something after death that they are written in the book of life, the Lamb's book of life. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. So here we have the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast that is made in their hand or on their forehead, just like the mark of the beast that Fleet goes and places on the statue of Hanuman. Anyone who receives this mark, as we see in verse 17, will have the right to buy and sell. Anyone without it, anyone who doesn't submit themselves, who doesn't subject themselves to this fantastical beast that speaks with the voice of Satan and submits itself to Satan, will not be offered the chance to buy and sell. They won't be able to make a living. They won't be able to operate. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So symbolically, or through numerology, the man that is represented by the beast is represented by the number 600, 66. So 666, 666. And here we have an artistic depiction of that beast coming forth. The beast represented by the number 666. Now, what we know of this beast is that he is a human being. Symbolically, this beast represents something else. It's representing a human being. And in this prophecy that's couched in symbolic, allegorical language, John is saying that either today, at this day, or in the future, there's going to arise this beast, this man represented as a beast, and has fantastical powers, going to have dominion over the world. Now, in Revelation 14, 8 through 11, the next chapter of Revelation, and there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she had made all nations drink in the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or on his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. So we have more about this mark of the beast. Any man who receives it will be blessed by the beast, will be able to live and survive and engage in commerce. But that judgment will come upon him. He will drink the wine of the wrath of God. He will be destroyed, and he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night who worship the beast in his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Now, it's likely that this number 666 and John's vision of the beast is meant to represent the Roman Empire, and specifically one of its emperors who is most well known for the horrific murder and torture of early Christians, Nero. If you look at the letters that make up his name and you break them down according to numbers, for instance, my name, Matthew, you look at the number, the letter M, and you find the number that matches that in the 26-letter alphabet. You take the second letter, A, which is 1, etc. B is 2, C is 3, and the like, and you add up the letters of Nero's name, you get the number 666. In other editions or other translations and other versions of the early manuscripts for Revelation, another number appears, and that corresponds with the Aramaic version of Nero's name. So there's good reason to think that this entire narrative is a kind of allegorical representation of nations that exist in John's time period, specifically Rome and its emperor, who at this moment are suppressing the religious minority of the Christians and slaughtering them in the most horrifying ways, torturing them to try to get them to recount their faith and the like, because they're viewed as a threat. So the number of the beast is also the number of a man, and that man is likely Nero. In this context, though, we're taking what is, in Revelation, a repudiation and a rejection of the Roman Empire and its domination of the world, its sinful, satanic domination of the world in the vision of the early Christians and John, and we're transposing it. The person in this tale who delivers the mark of the beast and places it on his subject, right, the statue of Hanuman, is Fleet, an English colonizer. Fleet brands the statue, and like Nero, he is a single man, but he represents an empire, just like the beast. He stamps this number of damnation on the forehead of the colonized subjects. So there's this damning indictment of colonialism in the parallel between the kind of ignorant and violent colonialism and the persecution of Christians in this early context, through or by way of this allusion to Revelation. Revelation also conflates man and beast in that you have the number of the man and the number of the beast. Kipling does as well, because he links the man, Fleet, and the beast that he becomes. Because Fleet is already a beast long before he's ever touched by the leper and cursed into this sort of lycanthropic transformation. He is a beast in the context of Revelation allegory, and he's also in the context of imperialism and colonialism. Remember that the beast opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. Fleet does the exact same thing. And so we have here, again, by way of this allusion to Revelation and the mark of the beast, that Fleet is the one to actually impose on the colonized subjects, a repudiation of the kind of colonial enterprise that he represents. Not colonialism in its entirety, because we still have these sort of positive, beneficent, and respectable examples of colonialism and the soldiers who enforce it, but a kind of colonialism that Kipling says doesn't work, and in fact reduces us to monstrous animality. If we act as Fleet does, he's saying of his sort of English contemporaries, then we too are going to be deformed into this monstrous, blasphemous creature. We too will suffer this damning degeneration into beasts. And in many ways, the other characters suffer this kind of fate. At the end of the tale, Strickland and the narrator are forced to, quote unquote, forced to, torture the Silverman in order to extract a cure for Fleet. At the bottom of page 9 of the story, after Fleet recovers and meets them again, Strickland did not answer. He caught hold of the back of a chair and without warning went into an amusing fit of hysterics. It is terrible to see a strong man overtaken with hysteria. Then it struck me that we had fought for Fleet's soul with the Silverman in that room, and we had disgraced ourselves as Englishmen forever. And I laughed and gasped and gurgled just as shamelessly as Strickland, while Fleet thought that we had gone mad. We never told him what we had done. Some years later, when Strickland was married and was a church-going member of society for his wife's sake, we reviewed the incident dispassionately. So there are two things to note here. These two men, because of what they've done, because of what they've been driven to do, because of Fleet and his approach to colonialism, his approach to the natives, has stripped them of their humanity. They're no longer who they once were. They've lost their status as Englishmen. They've been corrupted not necessarily by contact with this brutal, savage other, the Indian native, but because of Fleet, their contact with a man who did not treat the indigenous peoples with a kind of respect that was actually required of an appropriate form of colonial enterprise. And now, Strickland has lost his faith. Right? He's a church-going member of society for his wife's sake, not because he believes. Everything that made him who he was, everything that was respectable and noble in Kipling's eyes about his own tradition, this sort of humanity and reserve and gentlemanly conduct, and also his religious faith, have been stripped away from him. To prevent Fleet's transformation into the animal that he always was, they become less than Englishmen. They become less than men themselves. They're like beasts. So the great tragedy and the great moral didactic message of this tale is oriented around the true threat to English humanity. It's not about cultural contamination from the indigenous peoples. It's not about miscegenation and genetic contamination. No, it's about what they allow themselves to do or what they choose to do if they adopt an incorrect attitude towards the indigenous peoples. In the next series of videos, we're going to continue looking at these kinds of references and allusions and refocus on the way in which Kipling creates a weird atmosphere in the story.